Hello, my name is Annabelle Lee and welcome back to another episode of the Talking Classical podcast. I'm really pleased to share an interview I recorded last month with Stephen Maddock, Chief Executive of the City of Birmingham Symphony Orchestra. We talked about how Stephen got into the world of arts management and what led him to the esteemed position he's in today. We also discussed what makes the CBSO distinctive, the role of the orchestra in the City of Birmingham, artistic programming, and some of the challenges of Stephen's role. This is a really fascinating discussion about the more managerial and administrative side of running an orchestra. Many thanks to Stephen and the team at the CBSO for organising this interview. So I hope that you enjoy listening. Bye for now. So tell me how it all began for you. How did you get into this wonderful world of classical music and what led you to this amazing position that you're in now?
Well, it goes back a very, very long way. So I came from a reasonably musical family in that my father sang in church choir and me and my brothers all did that. So lots and lots of singing from a very early age. And in fact, my father's father had been a semi-professional violinist, and I still have and occasionally play his violin. But I didn't really do a huge amount of music, sort of academic music at school. So I didn't do O-level GCSE music, but I did lots and lots of practical music. So I was always playing my violin, singing, and that continued really when I went to university, where again, I didn't read music. I read politics, philosophy, economics, but I spent most of my time singing in choirs, running choirs, orchestras, playing.
Were you a choral scholar?
I wasn't actually, but I sang in Schola Cantorum of Oxford,
Right.
which I ran for 2 years. So that was really my route into arts admin, I was taking this amazing chamber choir on tour to America and to Europe and, really, although it was essentially voluntary work, it was at a sort of semi-professional level with soloists and conductors and in professional venues and so on. And I found I had a real appetite for doing that.
Yeah.
And I suppose alongside that sort of professional experience in music making was just an absolute sort of obsession for listening to music. So I grew up in Worthing on the south coast, which does still to this day have a regular orchestra series there with the Worthing Symphony Orchestra. So for 50p, I could go and hear live orchestral music once a month. And that sort of fed this passion. And this is obviously in the 80s, so well before Spotify and things like that. Yeah. If you wanted to hear your next Mahler Symphony, Sibelius Symphony, whatever it was, you had to go to the music library and rent a LP or a cassette, which is what I did a lot of. So I really got to know the repertoire very, very well during my teenage years and my time as a student. And that was really what set me up very well for a career. Funnily enough, I was doing some careers interviews at the weekend with students from my old college, and I was advising all of them to just get to know more music. If you want to work in our profession, you can never know too much about the repertoire of the artist, the history of music. And of course, doing so now is so much easier than it was when I was doing it. All you need is access to YouTube, really. That was a really important foundation for me. And then I, very fortunately, after I left university, pretty much straight away, got offered a job at BBC Radio 3. So that was then setting me on a path for professional working in music. I worked at Radio 3 for a couple of years, and then I got a job at the BBC Proms, which was kind of based 2 floors up in the same building, and there was a maternity cover to do the planning and organising of the Proms, which I was lucky to get. So at the age of 24, I was dealing with conductors and soloists and agents and orchestras from all around the world for the Proms 100th season, which was just amazing. I couldn't possibly have imagined that my career would lead me there.
And then how did you come to the CBSO from London?
So I organised the Proms for 7 seasons through till 1999. And then at that point, I just had a call one day from Ed Smith, who'd been running the CBSO for 20 years at that point, And Ed said, you probably know I'm standing down. Have you thought of applying for my job? And I said, well, I haven't really, but do you think it would be worth it? And he said, yeah, put in an application, see what happens. So I did that, and I was very fortunate to be offered the job. And it was at a tricky time for CBSA, so I'm not sure it was that competitive actually. But Simon Rattle had just left. This building we're in today, the CBSA Centre, had just opened. But there were really, really big financial problems, actually, for all the British orchestras at that point. The Halle had just avoided bankruptcy at this stage in the late 90s, and it was really, really tough financially. But I suppose with the ignorance of youth, I knew nothing. Well, I knew about it, but it wasn't going to deter me. And we were just about to have our first child. So at that stage, having just turned 30, the thought of moving to Birmingham and running the orchestra, but having hopefully a better sort of quality of life was quite attractive. So, when I was offered the job, we didn't need to think twice, we jumped at it. So there we are. In the last few months of the last millennium, we ended up moving with a tiny baby to Birmingham and starting out on this job, which I've enjoyed ever since.
Yeah, that's amazing, because I'm 31. So what was it like starting out, leading such a prestigious orchestra at such a young age?
I mean, there were lots of challenges, certainly. There would have been lots of challenges for anybody at that point because, as I say, Rattle had been, for good or ill, Rattle had been the CBSO brand for 20 years. And actually, lots of people in London, when I told them I was leaving to take this job, would say to me things like, "Oh, okay, that's very brave," and I think there was sort of a theory of orchestral gravity, which was, what goes up must come down, an assumption that the CBSO had got a bit big for its boots in the Rattle period and would naturally sort of fall back to the level of being, a comfortable provincial orchestra sort of thing. And my view was, there's no reason why that has to be the case, because actually all the amazing things that Ed and Simon had done here were mostly pretty permanent. So we had the best concert hall in the country, one of the best concert halls in the world, in Symphony Hall. We had this amazing new rehearsal and administrative home, CBSO Centre. The quality of the orchestra was every bit as good as it had been through Rattle's time here. And they had developed this really loyal audience, and also a sort of culture within the orchestra of not only of doing things off the platform, like the education work, which was already absolutely fantastic, the new music BCMG, the choruses. I mean, all of those things were permanent and legacies of the Rattle period. But also there was a culture of what you might call sort of continual improvement. So I was really struck by some of those first conversations with the players where they were saying to me, "We know we're at a good level, but we want to be even better." And that was what Sakari Oromo, who had been brought in as music director before I started, was also feeling. There was no sense of resting on their laurels or we've achieved this and now it's ours by right. It was absolutely about how can we be better. And that became a really, really important part of my whole time here. What's the next thing? What do we need to do next? How can we continually reinvent not just what an orchestra is, but the repertoire, the artists, the ways in which we work? And I think it was really interesting, probably going on in a lot of orchestras at that time, was a sense that instead of thinking the purpose of an orchestra is to give work to musicians, or maybe the purpose of an orchestra is to serve the gods of music, immortal Mozart and Beethoven. The purpose of an orchestra is to serve our audiences. It's to make ourselves useful within this amazing, multicultural, vibrant, young, diverse city. And I think we gradually worked our way towards that kind of vision of what an orchestra needed to be.